What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 4040 Vision podcast. I'm your host, Khaled Abdallah, and I'm joined today by a special guest, Mark Pattison, a former NFL wide receiver, a mountain climber who's climbed the 7 summits and Mount Everest, so we'll definitely get to that, founder and host of the Finding Your Summit podcast, a sports Emmy winner, and an executive at Sports Illustrated. So that was quite a mouthful. How you doing today, Mark?
I'm doing great. I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for agreeing to come on. I know you're a very busy guy with a lot going on. So today's topic is just about you. It's about your career in the NFL, your post retirement journey, everything that you've achieved since then. I know you've got a lot going on. So we'll jump right in. I want to talk about your early days, playing football and the career journey like leading up to the NFL. So when did you start playing football, and when did it become a real possibility that you would go pro?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, I was like a lot of people, a lot of kids growing up. You're in the backyard, you're playing the various sports. Back in the day, it was the big three: baseball, basketball, football. It's not like today where there's all these choices. There's 5,000 stations you can tune in, video games, that type of thing. There were 3 stations, there were no cell phones, there was no internet, right? So that's all I did. I mean, that was my entertainment, and I had a passion for it. I turned out I was good at it. I had natural gifts. I was faster than everybody else and had good hand-eye coordination and things like that. All got from my dad. But at the end of the day, he was probably 7 years old, and I started off playing sort of that flag football on the street, which led to the playground, which led to organized
Hmm.
football, which then led to, like a lot of kids, you start making your way up, and there's a bunch of kids who all start off in little league, and then by the time they get to high school, they start to fall off. And I just kept seeming to build and build. I was blessed in that I had a really good quarterback at the time. He was a year ahead of me. And so we connected, did well, got a lot of attention. And then the next year, I moved to quarterback. And so coming out, I was recruited as both a quarterback and a wide receiver. Ended up going to the University of Washington. Grew up in Seattle, Washington. So for me, that was like a 2-minute drive, from my house to my high school back to the University of Washington. And I hit it at the right time. We had a coach named Don James, who would later become a Hall of Fame coach.
Hmm.
And my first couple of years, we went to the Rose Bowl, and we're always in contention. We were number one probably half the time I was up there, and it was a real powerhouse. Back then, it was the Pac-10. Then it became the Pac-12, and it's kind of peeled back, and it's kind of back to where it is. But it probably wasn't until I played there 5 years. I redshirted a year, but it wasn't probably until my junior year, my senior year, that I really began to envision what life beyond the University of Washington could be.
Hmm.
At the end of the day, you never really see yourself playing in the NFL. But to me, that was just so lofty. But a lot of the guys that I played against, USC, UCLA, Stanford, are the guys on our own team, defensive backs, went off to the NFL. So I was used to being around those types of guys. But that's when it really became a possibility, and the journey really started to take shape at that point.
Yeah, and what was the highlight of your college career? I mean, I know you mentioned a couple Rose Bowl trips, and you guys were a powerhouse team, like you said. So what was the highlight of your time at UW?
Yeah, I mean, I think, but so you're talking about the highlight. This gets into a lot of things. We may talk about today, Finding Yourself, this book that I just put out, but it's really about the journey, and having the right belief system, and then a system in place to actually achieve certain things. So for me, back in the day, Don James was, as I said, our head coach, and he had adopted this pyramid of success from John Wooden, the great UCLA
Hmm.
basketball coach.
Yeah.
And essentially, it just really paved the way. There's 25 different blocks that ultimately get you to your championship. And the one thing about that is that there's no guarantees, right? If you work your ass off every single day, and it seems like forever, and I can tell you there were a lot of dark days way back when because I was undersized in terms of my strength. I was inexperienced in terms of being able to read defenses, understanding the complexities that were at the college level, and just waiting your turn because there's other guys in front of
Hmm.
you, and you have to wait for somebody to to either falter, get injured, or they graduate and they move on, and that's your time. And so you're asking me about, what are my best times, and more or less the first game that I started my junior year. We were playing Michigan. We were down by 14. We came back in the fourth quarter, and I happened to catch the winning touchdown with like 7 seconds to go. And Sports Illustrated caught it on their cameras, and we ended up in a big spread. And so I had a big feature. I was jumping over the guy, and that was certainly a highlight. And that was kind of the first major catch in my career, and that kind of set my path forward in terms of Husky fans and the coaching staff, their confidence in me. And then the last game I played in was in the Orange Bowl against Oklahoma, and it's a similar deal. We got down, and there was the final 5 minutes of the game, and we drove the ball down the field. And from about 15 yards out, I caught a fade route in the back of the end zone, and it turned out to be the winning touchdown. So, I came in, or I went out as I kind of came in, and
Yeah,
big moments and big stages with big audience, pressure moments, and I was able to deliver. And again, when as an NFL team, they need to know dependability. Can I depend on this person to actually deliver the goods? So those certainly, I mean, there's many others too, but those certainly, stand out as, on the front end and the back end of my college career.
yeah, yeah. And you go from UW to getting drafted by the then Los Angeles Raiders. So you can tell I'm a Raiders fan. So I was very excited to talk to you about that.
Yeah.
And so, what was
Yeah.
that pre-draft process like, and what was it like playing for Al Davis and the Raiders? During the heyday.
Yeah. It was a whirlwind. And back in the day, they had their version, the original version of the USFL. So I actually got drafted by the Portland Breakers, or I don't even remember what their
I
name
think,
was, but
yeah,
I
I
got
think that was
drafted by
it.
by that team, and then that yeah, and then like 4 months later, I got drafted by the Raiders, and in the seventh round. But because I had the Breakers had drafted me. We used that as leverage to get. At the time, it's pennies now, but at the time, it was the most amount of money for in terms of bonus money for a seventh round draft pick. So I was obviously excited about that, and I was grateful. But it was amazing. And the first thing, there's a whole process. You don't just try out. There's a process in the way that all works. And they have scouts that come to the university, these different universities. And then if you're lucky, they invite the top 335 players down to a combine. Now it's in
Hmm.
Indianapolis. That particular year it was at Arizona State. And the challenge around that, even though it was a great area to be down there because of the weather, was that they had it on grass. And so it's so much as a wide receiver about your 40-yard dash time. I actually excelled. I had a great 40-yard dash time. Um, who was also in that same combine was Jerry Rice, and I always love telling this story because I looked down on him. And whether it
Hmm.
was like the year of the wide receiver, and there was a lot of elite wide receivers, but because he played at Mississippi Valley State, whatever that is, versus playing in the Pac-10, he could never compete. And obviously, he went on to become one of the greatest players. There's certainly probably the greatest wide receiver, but certainly one of the greatest players of all time in the NFL. And mad respect for him. But anyways, it's a grind. It's high pressure. You're in front of all the coaches. You're the owners. Al Davis was there. I had no clue that the Raiders had any kind of interest in me. Actually, who wanted me were the Cowboys. Um, Everything has a reason and a fate and a destiny, and that's where I ended up with the Raiders. And I love being a Raider. I was back there during the day when my teammates were Marcus Allen, Tim
Hmm.
Plunkett, two Heisman Trophy winners, Mark Wilson, Howie Long, Matt Millen, Lester Hayes. The list just went on and on and on. Cliff Branch, and it was so much fun being involved in a sport that I loved, but also a team that really valued camaraderie. And we had probably way too much of that, but it was just a great time to be in that environment. The first year, I think we went to the AFC Championship and lost to the Patriots. They went on to the Super Bowl. But being around Al Davis is just commitment to excellence, and I've really trying to emulate not him, but just everything you do. You got to shoot for the stars. You got to reach high, and you got to have that same motto about commitment to excellence because good is the enemy of great, and it's easy to
Hmm.
be average. And too many people shoot for that because it's easy. But when you're talking about grit and determination and perseverance and resilience and all those buzzwords, it does fall back on what's your ultimate goal. And Al Davis's ultimate goal is to be in the Super Bowl every year.
Hmm. Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned some of the Hall of Famers that you got a chance to play with. Was there anyone in particular that you were completely blown away by, whether it was their hard work, their work ethic, their talent, all the above?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one guy that stood out for me. I mean, there's a lot of them, and there's a lot of Hall of Fame players on that team, but the one guy that just a great talent and great love of the game. Uh, even though he was a little aloof, but not necessarily in a bad way, it was just because he'd always been such a superstar. It was Marcus Allen. Marcus grew up in San Diego and then went to USC and had huge success there. And he won the Heisman Trophy, and they may have won the national championship. I can't remember, but he was always kind of in the limelight in the biggest market besides New York, that there was out there. And then he comes into the Raiders in 1983. I didn't get there to 85, but in 1983, they go to the Super Bowl, and then he becomes a
Hmm.
Super Bowl MVP, right? I mean, it's really hard to be like Rookie of the Year, Super Bowl, Heisman Trophy. I mean, he had all the accolades, and he did this under the biggest lights, that were there in terms of the media market, and so to handle that and that all that attention and everything else, it takes a special person. And so, anyways, he just a grinder, super athletic, for kind of a pretty boy, sort of. He was tough as nails, super talented, nothing but mad respect for.
Yeah, and then you went on to play also for the Rams and the Saints and the Seahawks as well. I mean, were there any particular experiences from the years spent in those other teams that you've carried with you till today?
Yeah, I mean, really, I spent a majority of my time with the Saints, and that was a unique time too because they'd never won the history of their franchise.
Hmm.
I didn't understand that. I had always won everywhere I went, and 20 years of losing year after year after year, and just like I didn't understand that. But I got down there and we had a winning season, and we went to the playoffs, and the whole team or the whole city was behind us, and it was super fun to be involved in that environment and what that was like. The drive, the passion. I don't think I ever paid for a drink or a meal when I went out on the town and had fun. But it was again great players times, great coaching. Jim Morris Sr. was the head coach, hardcore, attention to detail, discipline. And the strange thing about that team that year, or those couple of years I was down there, was the star of the team. Like the star of the team with the Raiders was Marcus Allen. He was the golden
Hmm.
goose,
Yeah.
and yet the star of the Saints was Morton Anderson, Hall of Fame kicker.
Mm.
And I'd never been anywhere in my life, even though as good as the kickers were wherever I was, that the kicker was the centerpiece. And in
Yeah.
this case, Morton Anderson was the centerpiece of that team. Very good.
Yeah. And I want to talk about your post retirement career. So I know I've seen you talk about this on the NFL 360 special that you won the Sports Emmy for. That was like a big challenge for you was adapting to life, after retirement. So what was the biggest pivot that you had to make, personally and professionally after retiring from the NFL?
Yeah, I think this goes for every guy, no matter how much money you make or you don't make, and that you're doing something that you absolutely love, and then you go off this cliff. And once you go off this cliff, it's just like, what do I do? What's my purpose? And how do I go forward? And one of the things I had to come to grips with is, at least having found it, there's nothing, even climbing mountains, there's nothing that will ever challenge you or give you that same excitement as being, in the Coliseum, playing for the Raiders, wearing the silver and black, playing against the San Francisco 49ers, being watched by millions of people, commentators commentating on every single thing that's going on in the field, the cheerleaders, the fans in the stands. You just don't get that when you're in business, which I've been in business majority of my life now. But when you're in business, you have big wins, it's not like the spontaneous moment of when you
Hmm.
catch the touchdown in front of everybody and you capture on Sports Illustrated. It's just like, and that's what drives the excitement because you just don't know what the next play is going to bring, right? Just all this uncertainty.
Hmm.
So, you just have to come to grips that, that was a moment in time, and you got to feel very blessed to be part of that. But at the same time, it's time to move on and go attack other things in other ways. And I call them, peaks and valleys, and
Hmm.
metaphorically. And so, um, even when like with these mountains, we'll get into that in a minute. But even climbing
Hmm.
these mountains and things like that, uh, it's just a long pursuit. And even when you get to the peak, you're only halfway there, right? So you haven't actually done what
Yeah,
your
good point.
projected goal is because you have to get back down to actually have climbed that mountain, right? And when you're in business and you have some big win, it's like, yay. And then, okay, but you've also been working on that for 2 years, right? So you're going like for Sports Illustrated, when I first got there, we were ranked 17 in the digital world called ComScore, and we ultimately became number one. And that took like 7 years to get to number one and surpass ESPN, and that was a huge accomplishment. I was like, yeah, all right, great, okay, what do we have to do tomorrow? Because the problem is that success breeds complacency, in business. And so the more successful you get, the more complacent you get, the more complacent you get, the less you get down and you fade back. And that's why you see, there's lots of examples of companies that have blown up. Circuit City back in the day, Blockbuster, the video, that they got complacent because they were very happy with their success. And then the digital age came screaming by and wiped them all out, right? And right now we're having this same moment in time with AI, right? And like, if you're not in front of it, you're going to fall behind it, and it's going to take out your job too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I wanted, like you said, you've hinted at this a couple times, the mountains that you've climbed. So, what was the spark that helped you, that made you go from football and playing in the NFL to seriously pursuing mountain climbing and taking on some of these summits?
Uh, well, I mean, I'd always been sort of climbing, not hardcore, but when I was living in Southern California and even Seattle, Washington at the time, climbing Mount Rainier and just doing on day hikes and things like that. And then this is like 15 years ago ish. But I was going through a divorce, and a lot of people go through divorces, and a lot of people go through hard times, and for me that was a hard time, but I just really needed to be in an environment that I could have some big ass goal. I call it a BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal that I could actually go chase. I could go uh, set my sights on. And because the seven summits, which are the highest peaks on every continent,
Hmm.
I knew it was going to take at least 7 years to go do this. It was more of a long term goal, but the ability to just focus on one of those peaks at one time, right? You're not, I wasn't trying to climb seven in one day, right? And so the training, loving the process, where your focus goes, your energy always follows. And so by me redirecting my energy from, poor me, I'm getting divorced, this is awful, what am I going to do next, to I'm going after the seven summits, I'm starting with Mount Kilimanjaro. Where the hell is it in the world? Oh, Tanzania. How do I get there? How do you get in? Do you need shots? How do you climb it? Who am I going to climb with? Right? You go through all these things. So that's what started to really dominate my mindset and
Hmm.
and really pull me out of this place I was in. And like everything, it just takes time to heal. You can't go around it. You have to go through it. And that's what I did. I went right through it, and I dealt with it. And it really helped too, I think, being in nature to really just process all the different, emotions and rationale and what am I going to do and all that kind of stuff, to go forward. And ultimately, I got healed in the mountains, and it was a blessing.
Yeah. And how long is the process and prep for each of these summits? Like how long in advance do you have to prepare? I mean, I know you mentioned some of the logistics, but I guess, the logistics and the physical aspect as well.
Everyone is slightly different because everyone is in a different hemisphere. Not everyone, but which where like Australia, for example, if it's winter here, which it is, it's summer there. So it just depends. But the bottom line is I never got out of shape and I'm always in shape. And what I ended up doing is moving to Sun Valley, Idaho. So that's where I am right now, broadcasting. And I live at 6,000 feet. I climbed a mountain this morning at 6 a.m. with a headlamp on. I'm out there almost every single day. And it's just a absolute blessing to be able to climb. Um, and so I if I had to leave right now today, for example, to go climb Mount Everest again, I could do that, right? So there's no replacement than doing the thing that you're actually going to do. What I did have to learn is advanced mountaineering, extreme mountaineering,
Hmm.
and that's how you deal with a fixed line, how you deal with sub degree temperatures, -60, how you have to hydrate yourself, how you have to try to feed yourself, things like that. Crampons, boots, how you climb yourself out of a crevasse if you fall in one, all the rope skills that you need to know. So that's what I had to learn more, the
Hmm.
technical aspect of how you climb mountains and stay safe, and you don't end up down in a big deep crevasse, and you know how to get your way out of it. So really surviving in extreme temperatures.
Yeah. And your journey on Everest was documented on the NFL 360 special. It's called "Searching for the Summit," and they mentioned some of the challenges that you went through. You know, some of the injuries you had, things like that. What got you through some of those really difficult moments on Everest?
I think all the training I'd done, the resilience, the grit, the determination, really having this whole mindset, which, again, I talk a lot about here. I'm
Hmm.
promoting a Funny Your Summit book, which just came out, which is just really 10 more steps, right? And so, a lot of times I think there's a lot of people who've either done Everest. There's not a lot of people, but the people who have done Everest, or a lot of people think that once you hit the summit of Mount Everest, it really represents the pinnacle of success. And for me, I was miserable. I was miserable because I was snowblind in one eye. I hadn't eaten in 3 days. I was running low on oxygen, and my Sherpa just decided to head back down. So I'm sitting literally on top of the world, just like, where is everybody, and how in the hell am I going to get off this mountain? I was miserable, right? I still had 9 hours to go, and so just really locking in and trying to, like, okay, how do I get down this this peak, especially at the top of Everest, where you're looking 8,000 down this way at Tibet, and you're looking 8,000 feet down this way, and you're looking at Nepal. And one wrong step, just like my tent mate from Antarctica, who is still lying up there at the Hillary Step, who had died in 2019. I climbed it in 2021. Was still laying there, and so most of the injuries that happen, or the people that die, it happens going on the way down. They're just so fried, they're so wasted, and they just start losing their mind, and their ability to rationale how to make things actually work, right? And so uh, it was really a super intense concentration on doing the exactly right things and being super intentional about doing those things, right? And making sure they happen. And I just kept running these movies. Okay, just get to that rock, just get to that snow chunk over there, just get around the Hillary Step. Okay, now we're here. We know we got to start going down this way. But it was a battle, and I ultimately did run out of oxygen, and I was like, how is this all going to play out, right? And uh, I mean, I was able to get down, but it again, it took like superpowers and the man upstairs to help me get down this mountain.
Hmm. Is this something that you would ever consider doing again? I know it sounds like it was incredibly physically and mentally taxing, but
Yeah, I mean, I would say the answer is yes and no, and here's the rationale. I would love to go back and do Everest if I could show up at Everest and just do it in one day. Actually, I don't want to do Everest, but what I was supposed to do is come down and go up the other side and do Mount Lhotse. I'd paid for that. I was ready to do it. It's the fourth highest mountain in the world. And and as I was sitting there on the south slope, looking back down at Lhotse, I knew that if I tried that, I would die 100%. I would die, no question. I just was so physically gone. I was down 35 pounds. Like I said, I was so hungry. I was so dehydrated. Um, and that thin air does do something to your head and your brain, your body, and everything else. Um, and so, if you're telling me I could train here, I could fly to Nepal, I could be standing at Camp 4, 26,500 feet, I could run up, I could do load seat and come back down, I would do it. But that's not the way it works. And
Hmm.
I think the thing that most people don't realize is that it takes 2 months to go through all this. 2 months is a long time to be sleeping on rocks and ice at 17,500 feet and eating shitty food. And like I said, I don't really have 35 pounds to lose, but that's how much I lost. And so when you're in that when you're in that environment, it just takes a super strong mindset to go through. And I'm just kind of at a point in my life now where I've done all these mountains, including the Matterhorn, the Eiger, and Mount Blanc, and Cotopaxi, and the Grand Teton, and all these other ones that I'm still going to continue to climb. I was just in the Dolomites last September, but in terms of extreme mountaineering and being away from my family for 2 months, I
Hmm.
don't need to do that anymore.
Yeah. So that 2 month period, it sounds like a lot of it is just kind of getting acclimated to the elevation. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think what a lot of people don't really understand is that the question is, like, why do you need to do that? You
Hmm.
need to do that for two reasons. One, you're going up and you're going down, and you're going up a little further and you're coming down, you're going up a little further and you're coming down. And you're building red blood cells. Red blood cells are the agents that carry more oxygen around your body. The higher you go and the longer you're at altitude, your body automatically produces more red blood cells. So you need that distance of time to be at high elevation for your body to be producing more, so that when you do go on summit day, for me it was May 23rd 2021, you have enough natural red blood cells in your system that if, like what happened to me, ran out of oxygen. And I spent the entire night, once I got down, I spent the entire night with no O's at 26.5, that you can survive that. If I were to fly there and just go straight to 26.5, I'd die immediately because I haven't built up anything. So it's a real thing, and you need to be there. The other part, so that's part one. Part two is that the jet stream sits on top of Mount Everest at 26,500 feet. It doesn't lift. Well, it lifts. It's not exact, but roughly 2 weeks in the springtime, and it lifts 2 weeks in the fall. And and we go back to, for example, that crazy storm, superstorm in 1996 that killed all those people. That book was critical, In the Thin Air of John Krakauer,
Hmm.
and where like 9 people died, and they climbed up into a superstorm. They didn't realize it. Now we have all these weather technologies that can forecast a lot better. But they got up there, and so they're essentially climbing in the jet stream. It was blowing 225 miles per hour, right? And so it's already extreme in that environment up there. And now you add the jet stream is now set back down, and complete chaos. And of course, people died and lost their fingers and toes and nose and all this other stuff. And so that's the danger, and that's why you have to wait it out, and you have to be there for 2 months to give your body enough time to prepare yourself for that moment. One, and then two, waiting for the jet stream to rise.
Hmm. Yeah. So what inspired you to start your podcast and start, interviewing guests and having folks and talking about your climbing and your journey? What was the spark behind that?
Yeah, so the name of my podcast is called Finding Your Summit. I've done almost 300 episodes, so I don't know what episode we're on right here with you, but 300 episodes is a lot of episodes. And
Hmm.
it really wasn't anything about me or my journey or my climbing or my football playing or, running Sports Illustrated, things like that. It was just really more finding other people. And the tagline is all about people overcoming adversity and finding their way. And what I just found, just loads of people, and many of them are very famous people. Peter Cetera from the band Chicago, and Mariel Hemingway, and the list goes on and on and on. And they're not all famous, but there are so many people that have overcome just amazing things that to me it's super inspiring. Like, how
Hmm.
did you overcome it? Like when everything was against you, and there was a guy I remember that he was a cop and he was sitting in his car and he was rammed like by he was sitting on the side of the road and then some car at 80 mile per hour hit his car, which burst into flames and 80% of his body burned. And I mean, just on and on and on about just the resilience of the body and the mind and the soul if you have the right reasons to live and finding out what those triggers were, like the mindset, again, same thing I had to have when I was coming back down to actually get you to the other side. And it's just been inspiring to me and uplifting, and I think it's been the same way for a lot of people who listen to that.
Is there a particular episode that like really stands out to you as one that I mean, I'm sure you're learning lessons from all of your guests and all your episodes. Is there a particular one for you?
Yeah, gosh, I've, again, 300 is a lot of episodes, when you wrap that in. So I can't pinpoint one, but I just had on a couple of weeks ago with Jim Mora Jr. He's now the
Hmm.
head coach at Colorado State. He's been a head coach with the Seahawks and UCLA and the Atlanta Falcons. And, he took UConn. They hadn't won a game, like 5 games in 10 years or some insane number, and they had back-to-back 9-3 seasons, and then he leveraged that and got this job with Colorado State. So we were just talking about leadership and what it takes to create a winning culture. What are those elements? How did he do it? Right, things like that. So to me it's really fascinating, on listening. Like the adversity, overcoming adversity is really, they got their coach fired last year because they were awful. They won 2 games or something, and so that's the adversity. So then the question is, now you got to find your way. So what systems do you have to put in place to execute to actually create that winning culture and then turn it around and then create a winning atmosphere that people want to be in. Jim and I
Hmm.
both played at the University of Washington. And so again, under Don James, who one of his disciples was Nick Saban. So all that success that you see with Nick Saban and what he did with Alabama and LSU. Same system that my coach had, same system that Jim was running, same system that Coach James had. So it's really interesting. Like a lot of those principles, again, good is the enemy of great, and commitment to excellence, and all those things that you asked about before about Al Davis. Like, what were the really triggers that to make him, who he was?
Hmm.
It's just where you want to put the bar.
Yeah. So all these lessons that you've learned from these great coaches you've been around, from the mountains that you've climbed, how are you able to apply them to your life, to your business, to running Sports Illustrated?
I think every single thing I do has a process to it. How you do something is how you do everything. Um, I wake up every single morning, 7 days a week. When it's pitch black out, this morning I climbed the mountain. It was 10 degrees. Actually, when I was going straight up the mountain, 3,000 feet at 10 degrees and with snow blowing, I was doing an interview with somebody in New York City. And I was out of breath. But again, it's like, what's the bigger picture? And my bigger
Hmm.
picture was, I feel like I've accomplished something big when I've already climbed up the morning. I mean, I finally drove back in the door by 8 o'clock my time, mountain time. And so for 2 hours before that, I was climbing, 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 and I got to ski down. And now I'm sitting here, I'm having a great conversation with you. And so I've got X, Y, and Z that I have to do today. I stepped away, by the way, from Sports Illustrated 2 months ago after running that for 10 years, and I'm doing my own thing. And so, again, I'm applying the same principles. I have an event called the Seven Summit Summit coming in September of this year here in Sun Valley at Sun Valley Lodge. It's going to be amazing. We've got amazing speakers. It's all about leadership and how you get things done. But that, if you just take that and contain that, like, how do you pull that off? And so I'm taking the exact same system, right? Of how do I make this a championship event where everybody wants to be here, and once they're here, they feel like they've just gone to the Super Bowl, right? Of events that are out there and being inspired and getting out and hiking and climbing. I've also just finished, third time plug, find this book, Finding Your Summit. This took me 2 years to write. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. And so again, like, how you do something is how you do everything. Having a daily discipline of doing, and it was a pain in the ass because I'm not a natural gifted writer. but I did probably 45 different edits, and I had some people help me along the way and just suggestions. And I thought I'd have it, but it wasn't, and it was repetitive, and it was this and that. And like,
Hmm.
how do you actually give value back to somebody else who's actually reading it, so it doesn't come across as just, oh, Mark has won an Emmy and played in the NFL and done, like, what's the commonality that we all have, which is how do we be the best versions of ourselves? And so, now I'm having to promote this, and so there's, what you're asking is, again, I try to apply all these. There's new things in my life that I have going on right now, so it's just not the same old writing Sports Illustrated. There are new challenges, there are new goals, there are big, hairy, audacious goals to
Hmm.
actually pull off. That's one. And then two is I have a daily discipline, what I do in the morning and every single night going to bed, at a certain time, so that I can rise early and conquer and have a feeling of accomplishment and know I did the best I possibly could on that day yesterday. And now we're
Hmm.
on to today, and what can I do to affect change for tomorrow?
Yeah. And for your book, I mean, what inspired you to write that, and what do you hope that your readers will get from your book? If there's like one or two lessons that they can pull from that and hold on to.
Yeah, I think so, it's not really about the peaks. I mentioned this a little bit before, but it's not as much about the peaks as it is about the valleys and when you're down and how you fight your way out of it. Because my life has
Hmm.
not been like, sunshine and rainbows all the way through and butterflies and all those things. It's just like how to conquer life's peaks with purpose and resilience, right? And that's for all of us. Everybody's got their own story. And like, how do you get through? And bad things are going to happen to everybody. And the real question is like, how you bounce back from that? How are you going to make
Hmm.
something out of nothing? How are you going to, bounce back when, like my case, I got divorced, separated, divorced, and then now you're tossed out there like, which direction do I go? My dad died about the same time of a massive stroke. It wasn't fun. And so, it's just like a kind of a guide on what has worked for me. I believe these same principles will work for others. It's a dumbed down version of the pyramid of success. In my case, it's called the summits model. So there's really, 7 pillars to this: your seed, you get an idea, you unleash it, you measure it, move it, you improve it, you traverse because adversity happens. And ultimately, once you get through, hopefully you can attain your goal, which is the summit, which is the last S in the summits acronym. And I go through each one of these different models, and I go through it. There's also a free PDF called What's Your Everest on my website, www.markpattersonnfl.com. And I just give it away. You just put your email in, and I will send you a 65-page thing. I actually wrote this sucker when I was on Denali for 5 days in a tent, minus 60 degree. There'd be like a foot of snow come down every day, and we were stuck, and it was awful. And so I tried to make the best use of that time. So I wrote this whole principle of like, what's a shorter version than the 25 pyramid, because that gets kind of confusing. Like, just really simplify it all out and what can be that, and to help. And so I go through in each detail, like when you're trying to clear your mind, come up with an idea and how are you going to go, what does that mean, how are you going to come
Hmm.
up with these ideas? One of the easy ways is action creates reaction, right? So too many people get stuck on just a certain idea of what they should do, and then they go, maybe I want to do it, maybe I don't, maybe I do, maybe I don't, and then ultimately never move. And my suggestion is just go in any direction, and that will create a reaction of either you love it or you hate it, and at least you're never going to go and be a banker or something, right? And so that's kind of how you get the ball rolling. And I'm very passionate about this because it happened to me, right? I've been, after football, I was just like, I basically started at zero. How do I dig out of this? So uh, that's what hopefully people will get out of the book, is this, they'll be inspired about how I've been able to dig out several times. And by the way, here's a tool for you that you can use in your own life as well.
So thank you, Mark. I really appreciate you taking time out of your very busy schedule to share your journey and talk about your book and everything like that. So where can folks find a copy of this book, and where can folks learn more about you?
Yeah, so I'm out keynote speaking. I've got a book out, Finding Your Summit. I have a podcast with the same name. I have an event coming up, and I've got online classes too that we're building out right now. So everything is contained in one spot, and that spot is www Mark Pattison, Pattison, NFL.com. It's all there, all the juice. Come visit me, and I'd love to hear from you.
All right. We appreciate it. I'll make sure to include links and all that in the episode description on all the platforms. And you can find us on all the major platforms, including YouTube and Spotify and all that. Once again, Mark, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Love it. Great job. Thank you.